Hello everybody, this is Dr. Novak again. I wanted to talk to you about, in my last video I said what my phosphates were. And I checked my phosphates out with this phosphate kit from C-Chem. And it came up to 2.5 parts per million. And I didn't trust the test kit because the color scale in here that they give you, this is it. This is very poor quality. Really, it is pixelated. It is just, it's so hard to tell. And I was getting about 2.5 right up in here. And I thought that was a little high. I thought, but it's very hard to tell with one of these test kits, the liquid ones. So I went out, and because my professional test kit is out of regions and everything, I decided, and that is my Lamont one, and it's a little more complicated to do than this particular phosphate test kit, okay? So I went out and got a Hannah one. This is about $50 kit, okay? And first thing this morning, because I just got it yesterday, I thought I'm going to check with the Hannah one and find out what my phosphate reading is this morning. So, because I thought it was a little high, I didn't want to do a water change or anything like that because I wanted to find out exactly what is the phosphate reading. And this is pretty accurate. This one's probably going to be as accurate as you're going to get. It's $50. I bought extra region here, so it's not really that expensive. But one thing I did want to say is when you have algae in your aquarium, usually it's going to be nitrates and phosphates. And you're getting your phosphates from your fish waste. Also, like my food has phosphorus, 0.2%. It says minimum. Okay, that's minimum 0.2%. It doesn't tell you what the maximum is. It just says the minimum. So it could be 0.3, it could be 0.5, it could be even 1 of phosphorus. It just says minimum. That it doesn't tell you what the maximum is. So you're not going to get any less than 0.2 from fish food. Plus you're going to get nitrates from the fish food. And anything else you put into aquarium, even some of your fertilizers and stuff have phosphates in them. Let me see if any of these products, this Flourish, let's see, this is a Flourish, and let me see if that has phosphates in it. It has nitrogen in it, 0.07%, so your nitrates are going to go up. And let's see, magnesium, sodium, zinc. It really doesn't, from what I can see, doesn't say anything about phosphates, if you're going to get any. Here it is, available phosphate, 0.01%. Okay, 0.01%, very low. That is very low. Nothing to worry about at 0.01%. But the fact I'm making here is it's still adding phosphates to the aquarium. Now, a lot of people say, well, you need phosphates for your plant. Well, there's the Flourish there, and it's 0.01. That's very, very little phosphate to worry about. So your plants don't need as much phosphate as you think. The trouble is, when phosphates go up, you're going to have algae problems. And these algae problems can erupt into bigger algae problems, even go into cyanobacteria or beard algae, hair algae, all kinds of algae problems. So with the Anoxic filter, with the tests that were done in Italy by Dr. Franco, he found out that it did eliminate phosphates, brought his phosphates down in his aquarium with the goldfish a lot. And he was very happy about that. That not only did it do nitrates, but it did phosphates. So I wanted to test it. So this morning I got the Hannah out and I did a test and it came out to be 1.36. That was this morning. That's pretty good, a lot better than what this was showing. So it wasn't 2 or 2.5. It was actually a lot lower. So I decided I had some pads, some like phosphate pads. And, oh, before I get onto that, I tested the tap water here in Florida with this. It came out to 0.11. So we have phosphates in our tap water. I'm sure a lot of people have phosphates in your tap water. A lot of people may have nitrates. So this explains why some people have algae and some people don't have algae. If you look at the video that I made and I gave you the guy who did the test, remember? And he did 2 tests. He had 13 neons in there. And he only fed them 0.2 grams of food. And the one that used the CO2 had 0 phosphate and 0 nitrates, where the one that didn't use CO2, the nitrate level and phosphate level just kept going up and up and up, which would make sense. By the end of the month, you got to do a 90% or 95% water change to bring it back down. But he showed 2 tanks, one with and one without CO2, same amount of food, same amount of fish, how the one with CO2 kept steady at 0 nitrates and phosphate, and the one without CO2 kept climbing, even though he had the same amount of light and everything. So I decided to see why I have a little bit of algae, and it is, well, as we can see, 1.36 is too high for phosphates. My nitrates are 0, but the nitrates aren't a limiting factor. This is your limiting factor. This needs to go down to 0 or even lower. Okay. And preferably, the lower it goes, the better off you're going to be in control of your algae problems in your freshwater aquarium. This is a lot of money. I understand it's 50 bucks, and I understand that for a lot of hobbyists. When you use these kind of tests like this, one thing you should always do is, a lot of people don't know this, but when you do your test and you're handling these bottles, constantly wipe the bottles off, constantly, before you even do your tests. When you do your shaking, anything, always have it would be preferably that you have a lint-free cloth. Ooh, that was hard to get out. And when you're done, handle it like this. Make sure you always, when you use one of these electronic comparators like this, all your test tubes have to be real clean. So that's just get in the habit of wiping them down before you put them in here, because it makes a big difference in the world without having fingerprints all over it. And I was quite surprised it was 1.36. And so if you think about it, if you do the math, which means that I've already fed the fish several times, but let's say you feed the fish 6 times, 0.2. Well, it's 0.2 times 6. So you're 1.2 in phosphates. You already added 1.2 phosphates. Now you have to add 1.2. 1.2 plus 0.11 equals 1.31. I had 1.36. So you add your water in there, which is going to have a 0.11 right off the bat, at least here in Florida. It's not 0. Okay, that's pretty low though. I'm not complaining. 0.11 is pretty good. And even 1.36 is pretty good. But you keep adding in the fish food, and as you can see, look at the number. 1.31, 1.36. So what the Anoxic filter or the BCB is doing is stabilizing the phosphates going in with the food and the amount the fish are producing. It's just stabilizing it. In other words, if the phosphate kept increasing, would this number increase, this 1.36 from this, or does it need help? So I can understand where someone would have high phosphates and they use the BCB and it would bring them down. And if you look at this, you would say, wow, that's pretty good, 1.31 or 1.36 that I had this morning. So what I decided to do is I had some pads for some phosphate removing pads that you buy on the internet, or you can get them at, I think, Petco or something. They come in a package. I think they're like $8 for 2 pads, and you cut them to the size of your filter and put them in your filter. They're supposed to help absorb the phosphate. They're a chemical filter, almost like a polyfilter. Polyfilters are chemical filters. They're not like carbon. They're being chemically treated to do a job for you, and they do become exhausted. And I would say these filters probably won't last more than a month or two, depending on your phosphates and how high they keep going. Now the BCB is taking care of phosphates and bringing them down, which I will see in the future how long that pad's going to last. Okay, so I took the filter out, emptied the water, and put one of those pads in, to help clean it. And I cleaned everything out. The BCB basket, of course, you don't touch it. All you do is set it off to the side. I cleaned the little sponges. I put the pads in, replaced everything, put fresh water in the canister filter, and hooked it back up. That's all I did. Okay, that's it. That's all I did, just to see if, and now I fed the fish 2 more times since I did that this morning. Okay, sometimes when I see the tank, I'll just add a little bit to the guys, here, and they like it. They eat it, so I don't add that much to go all over the tank. Well, believe it or not, it's been a couple hours. I'm going to say a couple hours. It's brought the phosphate reading with this Hannah down to 0.93, just within 2 hours. Because I believe that really is because the phosphates were so low to begin with. And now I added that 0.9, and don't forget, I fed them 2 more times. So I'm adding phosphates to it. It still brought the phosphates down to 0.93. The TDS, I just did a TDS reading of the aquarium. It's 169, which is pretty good. That's pretty good to have a TDS reading of 169. And of course, you can get TDS meters like this for TDS. And this will just test the dissolved solids that are in your aquarium. These aren't really very expensive, and it helps. So what I guess would be the best bet is if you could add water that had no phosphates in it. Unfortunately, if you have evaporation, you're going to be adding water, and that means you're going to be adding 0.11 parts per million phosphates back into your tank. So you're probably not thinking about that, are you? You're probably thinking, wow, if I had 0 nitrates, why would I still have algae? Well, because your phosphates need to get down to 0.05, even in fresh water, even lower than that. Just like the Flourish I just showed you had 0.01 phosphates in that. That's very, very low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get phosphate-free food, which they do have phosphate-free food. And I think that food is made in Italy. Show you a picture of it. It's not cheap. Container of it's like 15 to 17 bucks to get phosphate-free food for your fish. So it's expensive. I'm going to order some because that way I don't have to keep adding phosphates into the aquarium. Now, you're probably thinking, is it a big deal? Well, in the saltwater hobby, there was a time when people weren't even almost feeding their fish because they were so scared to put phosphates in their aquariums. And their fish were dying. They were saying, why are my fish dying? Well, because they're starving them to death. Okay, and if you notice, if you have a planted aquarium or something, you notice how people barely have any fish. I mean, I have the parrotfish, which are big, have mass, they eat a lot, they love to eat a lot. I'm not going to starve them. You know, they're my pets. They're just like you have. Goldfish or whatever you're going to have. And I don't want to have a 20-gallon tank with, 13 neon tetras in there. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it if that's what you like. I want to have some fish. That's why I'm in the hobby. And that's why most of us get in the hobby, because we want to have some fish. Come on, we want to have some catfish. We want to have, whatever we want to put in the tank. That's basically what we want, right? And if you want to plant an aquarium, you notice they barely put any fish in, because this is the reason why. They don't want to keep adding more and more phosphates. And every time I do a water change here in Florida, I'm going to have 0.11 more phosphates going into my aquarium. And then we think, why can't I win the battle against algae? This is the reason why you can't win the battle. You need help. This is what the Anoxic filter or the BCB basket will do. It will help you. It will bring your nitrates down, so that's a problem you won't have to worry about. You'll just have to worry about your phosphate. Yes, it will bring phosphates down. That is low, 1.36. But is it low enough? No. You're still going to have an algae problem. You won't have an algae problem with phosphates being that low if you start dimming up your light. Now you're back to your light being real dim, and who wants that? Who wants a dim aquarium? I don't want a dim aquarium. I want a nice bright aquarium like we all want. And we're all trying to beat the problem of the algae. So I'm going to try to work on the problem with phosphate-free food. I'm going to order. And I'm going to try to work on the problem with testing the water and seeing if I can get this even lower than 0.93. And I'm going to use the pads, the filter pads. I have some more coming in. I ordered some off the internet to take away phosphates also to help bring that down. I think once that whole problem gets solved, we're going to be on easy street with our plants not getting covered in algae and having any kind of algae problems. So I'm going to keep you up to date. I wanted to do this fast video, probably not a fast video now, but I wanted to do this video just to keep everybody up to date. So if you decide you're going to make this BCB basket, you're going to make it, or you're going to have a plenum or whatever, you may help your nitrates, but your phosphates are still going to exist because you are constantly, every day, putting in phosphates into your aquarium. You are constantly doing that. It's nonstop. And I'm just telling you the truth. That's what I found out. A lot of water, like the water we have here in Florida, doesn't have any nitrates. But every time I add water to my aquarium, I can't help it. I'm putting more phosphates in. So I can't get away from that. The more water you put in, the more phosphates you're going to put into your water. But within a couple hours, it's 0.93. That's not bad. It's under 0 now. So if you had a test kit and you couldn't read it that good, you'd probably read 0 phosphates. Okay, that's still not low enough. Even at 0 phosphate, you need to bring it down to 0.05 or even less. We need to bring those phosphate levels down to get the algae down. Plants don't need a lot of phosphate. As you can see, the flourish only had 0.01. phosphates. So this is a manufacturer that's claiming you do not need all those phosphates in your aquarium. Flourish, Seachem. And apparently they feel that you need potash, you need calcium, you need magnesium. But as far as phosphates, 0.01, apparently it's not that important for your plants. Shake it up, put this in your aquarium. You were still going to add a little bit of phosphates, but why are they bringing the phosphate level so down? And everyone keeps saying, well, your plants need phosphate, they need phosphate. Well, I don't know, why don't you write to the Seachem and say, hey, how come your fertilizer, how come your phosphates are 0.01? I mean, 0.01, saltwater aquariums would love to have 0.01 for their reef aquariums. That is so. Is phosphates really needed that much for your plants? The answer is no. They don't believe it is. They don't have it in their bottle. I don't see any other bottles that they sell that they're nothing but phosphates. So you can add a ton of phosphates. Pretty well-known brand. It's been around for years and years and years. Flourish has. People have been using it. It's a very good brand. No phosphates in it. It has nitrates of 0.07. That's pretty low, nitrogen. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to have very low nitrogen, very low phosphates. The question is that everyone keeps coming up, why plants need nitrogen and plants need phosphates? But look at this, the iron, 0.32%. It's got more iron in it. And the thing that the plants need, and they know it, trust me, they know it, is ammonia. Okay, that's what the plants are looking for. Remember, they don't want nitrogen. They want ammonia before they want to take in nitrogen. Nitrogen is chemical work for a plant, and they can only do it during peak photosynthesis. So in the test where the guy did the test with the CO2, his plants were fast growing, peak photosynthesis. They were keeping his nitrates and phosphates down to zero because they were sucking out every bit of ammonia that was there, and therefore they were sucking out all the nitrogen and phosphates that were in the aquarium. Of course, we don't know. He's just said zero. If you were to take my tank right now, and your test was like this, I'd be reading zero. 0.93 is lower than zero. I'd be reading zero. But really, it's 0.93. So it's still there, but a test kit. So when those guys did their tests with phosphates, what did they use for a phosphate test kit? Did he use something as good as this, or did they use something like this, where I couldn't tell very good on the phosphate? So you can see how you can get tricked, where you can get something like this and say, oh, you know, the phosphates are 1.36, but if you watch their tests, how their phosphates and nitrates keep climbing, my nitrates don't climb, and my phosphates aren't climbing. Okay, it's just the inaccuracy of the, or I can't say the inaccuracy of the test. Maybe it's my eyes or whatever. I just couldn't tell any better than the 2.5 of what the phosphates were. But this I'm going to trust is not lying to me. This is brand new, and I just got it, so I'm going to say that. Well, anyhow, until next time, this is Dr. No. I hope you learned a little something about manufacturers and what they're putting in. They know what is needed. They've been around a long time, and they have, this is microelements and trace elements and other nutrients. This Flourish is. And besides iron is a major element for your plants, they know not to overcrowd your tank with nitrogen and phosphates because it's just going to cause a big problem. And that's what could be happening, and you're not thinking about it. Hey, why do I got this problem? It's nitrates. Well, it could be nitrates, and it can be phosphates. So maybe if you want a very rude awakening, buy yourself one of these test kits. They're like, this one's like $50, which isn't that bad. and test to see what your phosphates are. Then test your tap water to see what your phosphates are. And then a lot of answers, a lot of questions that you have are going to be answered right off the bat. You may find out, and you may be shocked, that it's not nitrates causing your problems, or it can be nitrates, but it's also phosphates, because it takes very little phosphates to really cause havoc in your aquarium with all the kind of algae and stuff. Remember that. So use a BCB, bring those nitrates and phosphates down, then add, like I did, the phosphate pads to help bring it all the way down. Now this is within a couple hours, so tomorrow morning I'm going to check this out again, even though I still have to feed the fish 2 more times or so today. I'll probably feed them, and I'm going to see if that even goes lower. And if it does, then my algae should start dying off, and the higher order plants will be taking over. So I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you got some good information out of it, and have a very good day. Thank you very much for watching.